Hi, welcome to Ed, and today we are looking at the paper 2 from Igcse Computer Science with a specific focus on the database section. We'll start by having a little look at the learning of the content quite quickly and then how that relates to an exam question for each of those sections. I'll put a listing below of the timings for each section, so feel free to skip to the bit that's most relevant to you or watch the whole thing if you really have no idea what's going on yet. But the database section is about 10 to 15 marks of any paper 2 and a pretty easy way to guarantee some quality marks. So let's get started. What is a database exactly? Well, take a look at this information that's right here. So when we have a store of data together, it can be organized in different ways. Look at the way that this is specifically organized. It's the columns and the rows going across here, and also the order that the data is taking as well. How is it all stored, in fact, inside of this boxy looking area that we commonly know as a table? So a database is just a collection of data that is organized in a structured row. We've put it into a table. It has columns, it has rows, there are categories of organization. We've sorted the data based on something important like price. It is a collection of data organized in a structured way. In the GCSE and within database as a subject and topic and as an application you use, there are some specific terminology that we're going to want to know and understand. So first of all, tables. Every single database is made up of tables. Here is a table right here. This table has rows going across. These are called a record, and we also have these categories up at the top here which form each column, and those are our fields. And so you can see the fields listed across the top here for each sort of category of information. Now, a really common question that you will get in the computer science exam is how many fields and how many records does a table have? So calculate that for me now. How many fields and how many records? Now in your exam, you're going to be dealing with what we call a flat file database. So that means it only has one table. That's all you'll have in your exam, one table. And so do you have the answer now for me? How many fields? So you just count the number of categories at the top, the number of fields, there are 7, and how many records? Well, these records are the rows that go across. Think about it like a school record, like you have a permanent record, a record that is about you, and it has lots of categories of information all about you, like your name, your age, your address, the subjects that you study, anything naughty you might have done. All of this is listed across and forms one record. So how many records? Well, we just count the number of rows here, and there are 14 records in this table. There you go, you just got your first 2 marks. Now, we mentioned a flat file database has one table. Well, a relational database has more than one table. So they have 2 or more tables that are joined together by key pieces of information. Take a look at these tables down here. This is an example of maybe something like IMDb. It could also apply to maybe music libraries. We have these huge databases of information. We use them all the time. Anytime that you're streaming something, searching through Netflix, you're looking on YouTube. These are databases of information that are categorized together. You might want to search for a certain actor. You might want to search for a certain film. So when we look at these tables and how they join, I mentioned they're joined by a unique field. And you see this key here that indicates this is what we call the primary key. And every table has one of these primary keys, and it is a unique identifier that does not contain any duplicates, and it cannot be left blank. So again, if you think about at your school, you probably have a student ID number. Your email address might even be your student ID number at your school name your country domain. This key piece of information is what allows us to join tables together and to have just a unique identifier for records, and it is essential for every single table. Okay, now in this table, which one is the primary key? So you take a look at this table and tell me, one of these fields is a primary key. It must have data, so it must have data in it. It cannot be blank. It is a unique identifier, and it does not contain any duplicates. So if you get a question about this in an exam, you need to take a little look down here and see, well, look at this, there's a lot of yes no's in here, there's a lot of repeating FTCVs, sometimes we have the same screen size, things can be the same price. What we're looking for with a primary key is some sort of identification number, and that is normally what it is, an ID number. And if you're asked to suggest a primary key, you're going to want to come up with some sort of ID number based on whatever the topic and the scenario is. So let's take a look at this examination question. So this is a past paper question, and it's a nice simple one to start with. How many fields and records are in this table? Answer it, pause at the video, answer it real quick. The fields are going across 1, 2, 3. There are 3 fields in this table, and the records are going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 records in this table, 2 marks, nailed it. Here's another exam question from the same table. This time, it wants you to explain why none of the fields in this database can be used as a primary key. Feel free to pause it and answer it now. Write yourself a question down and then we'll go through it. A primary key is something that has to be a unique identifier. It cannot contain any duplicates, okay? If you look at each of these, well, here 129, immediately there's another 129 here. I've got 225s. If I look in here, I've got 2 toys, 2 shoes. Oh, I've got 3 toys. And even over here, the name, well, Jane Smith is in charge of both toys and shoes. So there are duplicates in every single one of these fields. So if you get this question, why is it not good for a primary key? Just have a look and find the duplicates and see that there will be no field that does not have a duplicate inside of it. All right, another question on this same table. What could we use as a primary key instead? So nothing here is good for a primary key. What we need to do is take a look at the scenario, read the scenario, pause it now if you want to, write an answer. So a database staff phone was set up to show the telephone extension numbers of the members of staff working at the department store. So how could I uniquely identify? I would go with some sort of staff ID. So if it's about staff phone, what would be a unique ID? Well, it could be a staff ID. So I would go with a staff ID. That's mark number 1. And then the reason is because the table is about staff and it's a unique way to identify each staff member. So no member of staff will have the same ID number and there are no duplicates. So just like in programming, when we handle data in a database, we need to assign it a data type. So when we've had a variable, maybe we would make that a string data because it's going to hold text, or we might make it into a float because it needs to be able to complete decimal calculations. Exactly the same thing. So one of the main questions that you're going to get is about assigning a data type to each field. By all means, pause this and take in all of the different data types here, but let me just outline which are the most important to know. It's a little more simplistic in this section than with programming. So let me just jump down here to these 3. So here I'm mentioning number, and that's any type of numeric data. Now you'll be used to having integers and floats. So you're used to separating a whole and a decimal. In the database section, you can actually just categorize them as number, and it can be used for both the real and the integer. So it's actually even easier. But if you want to call it an integer or a real, they will accept it, but you can just put number. And in the same way, for alphanumeric data, instead of using string, which is what you might be used to, you can also just say text. But any of those would be accepted, alphanumeric, string, or text. I like alphanumeric, they will accept text, and you might be used to string, so make your choices. But you can categorize the number ones together, especially. We have date and time for any date and time data. Money, you is not going to select a decimal in the same way that you might have done if you were doing programming, because we want to be able to assign it a formatting based on its currency. So think about databases as that they produce reports, and the reports are from querying or searching the data. The presentation of those reports can be formatted to include certain currencies or a format of the date. We have a separate field category for this, a separate data type. And then the other important one is the Boolean. Now you know Boolean already. You are used to using yes, no, true, false data. We studied it in computer architectures. You understand understand it from the logic gates, you know what it means to have an on, off, yes, no, true, false value, and that is the Boolean field. We're going to go through some questions now to help you. So let's take a look at this first field here, TV ID. It's our same one from before. This is alphanumeric data. It contains text and it contains numbers, so we would categorize this as an alphanumeric. Next to that we have screen size. Take a look at those numbers. Oh, I said numbers? Is that a number in there? Well, yes it is. Are those numbers organized in some sort of way? Have we handled the data? Why, yes we have. This is numeric data and it can either be used for calculations or number handling, sorted very nicely by largest to smallest. This is a number field. Next is the 3D. So that is a yes, no category. Yes, no, on, off, true, false, two options, Boolean, curved and flat. Letter data. Letters are alphanumeric. They are text. So it is a text or string alphanumeric field. Next we have the internet. Why, that's another yes, no. Yes, no, true, false, Boolean. What's next? Well, it's HDD, so is this high definition? Why, yes it is. Oh, no it's not. Yes, no, true, false, Boolean. And lastly of all, the price. So our price, it is a type of numeric data, but it's specifically formatted. Look at that $ right there. This is money data, so it is a currency field. So we've got alphanumeric, number, Boolean, currency. We didn't have a date and time in here, but I'm sure you're going to recognize that when it comes up. How about we have a go at this question? Pause the video, try and put in the type of data for each of these fields. Take a look at this bit there and read the descriptions that they are giving you, because that will help you to understand. So in this one here, arrived does not mean yes, no, it has or it has not arrived. Read the question carefully, pause the video, put your answers, and we'll see how you do. Let's look at those answers. So first of all is the title, and both the title, the artist, and the description are going to be text fields because they are alphanumeric. You could potentially use memo. If you don't know what memo is, it's just a larger amount of text that is allowed, because in a database we set the field length in order to reduce the size of the database file. But if you don't know memo, don't worry, it's just a larger size. So next coming up is catalog number. Now this one, a little bit of a curveball with this, because that is likely to be a primary field. Essentially, this is likely to be the primary key. It's likely to be the identifier. That doesn't need to be handled as number data, so it might not be a number. It might likely be an alphanumeric field like CN47895, CN674. You know, it could be like a mixed text and number. So I would just put it straight away as text. But if you've built in database, you may also be used to using an auto number for your primary key. And technically it does say catalog number, so you could put number and it would be acceptable. Next is size, and the size is the area in square centimeters. So that is clearly a numeric value. We will mark that as a number. Next up is price. Price is about the money and the money formatting. So that is a currency field. Arrived, it's not yes, no. Arrived is the date that the picture arrived at the gallery, and so it will be a date and time field. And lastly is sold. Did that picture sell? Yes? No? Is it true or false? Did it sell? It's a Boolean. And so our last question here is, which one of these would be the primary key? I did technically already give you the answer to this question. So it's going to be whichever is the unique field, and the unique identifier here would be the catalog number. So right there is 5 marks. Very, very easy. There's 5 main data types to remember and the definition of a primary key, and you're winning for this section. So next are our validation rules. Now you will be used to using validation in your programming also, because you will have probably programmed to make something is the correct range or it's the correct data type. So we do the same thing in databases to make sure that the data that is entered is valid, which basically means, is it sensible? Is it reasonable? Is it the correct data type? Is it in the correct range? Is the field definitely not blank? Things like this. So let's run through the key validation rules that you need to know, and you might want to pause it as we go through and soak these in. So the first of all is a type check. That is a specific data type. So it makes sure if you've set it as currency, we're only accepting number values. Like you can't type out $3,000. You're going to have to put in, type it out in words. You're going to have to write 3000. Next is a length check. So that will check that the data is meeting a set number of characters. So if it has to be a 4-letter code, a length check will ensure that. A format check will make sure that it is meeting the correct formatting requirements. So for example, if you had a date and time, we have a difference between an American format and a British format, or using a long date and a short date. So notice there's no 0 here and it's just 21 instead of being like 09 and 2021. So it puts it into the correct format that you choose. Presence check just means the field cannot be blank. That's a great one to put on a primary key, by the way. And a range check, you'll be used to this one. So that's making sure that the data is within a specific range. By all means, pause it, soak this in, but let's go and see it in an exam question. And I think that's going to help us out. So the most important thing to remember with an examination question is you cannot use the same validation type twice. So don't go down every single one of these saying range check or type check. You have to do a different one for each one. So think about that carefully when you're choosing. Read the description of the question again, and let's have a look. So first one is catalog number. That is a primary key, and as I mentioned in the previous one, I would just instantly put presence check in this one because a primary key cannot be blank, so it's the easiest one to use presence check for. Next is size. So I would make that into a type, because the size needs to be numeric. It's very specifically that it is in square centimeters. It must be a number. So I would use that for the type one, because when it comes to these later ones with price, you can use a range check on the number value of price to make sure that it is greater than 0. But in actual fact, you could swap those around and do the same thing for both. You're not going to have a price that's less than 0, and you can't have an object size, like you can't have a picture that's less than 0 centimeters. So these could actually be swapped around. So one of them will be the type for the either it being a currency or it being in centimeters, being number, or a range to make sure that it is greater than a 0 price or greater than a 0 size. And a lot of the time, the same type of check can be used in more than one place. So maybe do it in pencil first, and then you can move them around a bit if you feel like you're running out. The last one, I chose format, because when we use the Boolean field, it's true, false. But you're going to set that to maybe appear as yes, no. So has it sold, yes, no. You're not going to put has it sold, true, 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 false, true, false. You're going to put yes, no. So setting it to have the format of yes or no is another type of validation. The very last part of the examination is completing a query by example. And basically a query is just a way to search the data. So a database is a way to store information, but ultimately we want to handle that information. It's data handling. So you want to be able to search that data using a criteria and then be able to organize it. And that's what a query does. Now, when we complete a query, we use a table like this. This is exactly what you'll see in the examination, and when you get the marks, you are marked by each column. So every column going down is where you get your mark. So it's really important to fill out each section carefully. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to put your fields at the top. So any fields that are required, put these fields in here, one in each column, and then immediately put the table that it came from. This is the most common error that I ever see, is students forget to put the name of the table, and then you lose a mark for the whole column because there's no table name. If you've done that across all 4 of them, you've just lost 4 full marks. So put your table name in, and you're only using a flat file, so it's always the same table name. And also in the question, it's always in capital letters. So whatever's in capital letters, that is the name of the table. The next is for sorting. So you can sort ascending or descending. Then you also have to select which fields will be showing. So you do that by ticking these boxes. Now, always in the question, there will be some fields that they don't want you to show. Normally the one that you're searching on, like if you have to search for Samsung, for example, you don't need to have a printout that says Samsung, 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 Samsung. Like, you don't need it to say Samsung 20 times. You can just put in the title Samsung televisions for less than $7,000. So next is our criterias. And criteria, like I said, it could be less than $7,000. That's the type of thing you put here. So this one, I'm looking for a price that is more than 25. Also use another criteria down here. This is one of the most important things for you to know, is that anything that's on the same line is an AND criteria, and anything that goes onto the next row is an OR criteria. So if you want something that's greater than 25 and true, it goes on the same line. But if you want an OR true, it goes into here. So this would tell us on sale. So is it on sale, or it's greater than $25, whatever money this is. So let's have a look at some of those rules. My best exam tips for you. This is like a 5-mark question that you can get really easily if you follow these rules. So first of all, know your ascending to descending. Ascending is small to large, A to Z. Descending is large to small, Z to A. Next, your Boolean criterias. Anytime that you have to do a Boolean, do not put yes, no, put true, false. True is yes and false is no. And just like in our programming, a capital letter is used at the start of true and false to represent that Boolean value. When you have a string criteria, always use an equal sign and speech marks, okay? Just like in programming again, our speech marks indicate string data. I can't see my fingers right now, but I'm making speech marks for you. It equals speech marks, text value inside, okay? And lastly, the number range. If you are using a number range, you need to have your comparison signs. If there is more than one side to the range, it should be separated by an and. So you have to put comparison sign for the greater than and a comparison sign for the less than, and they need to be separated with an and written in capitals. We got it? We got it. All right, so really important one when we have two different criteria. I just mentioned this before. There's a difference between searching for an and searching for an or. So the query will often have more than one criteria. If we want an and condition, it happens on the same line. So in this one, it's going to be greater than 25 and on sale, as opposed to this one here, where it will be greater than 25 or on sale. Or goes on two different lines, the and goes on the same line. Very important one. Let's try an exam question. Shall we see how we can do? Let's see the actual exam question for this scenario we keep looking at. Here is our query by example. It says in the grid below, you're going to show the catalogue number, title and price of all unsold pictures by the artist Twister. I'll teach you how to just knock through this really quickly. Don't overcomplicate. Forget all this. The only thing you need from this bit right now is picture, because what does that big capitalized picture mean? That's the table name. Okay, so we're going to work through, starting at the beginning here. So it says, first of all, you're going to select and select and show the catalogue number. So in it goes, catalogue number. Now, if I'm selecting catalogue number, I'm going to put the table that it's from, and I'm going to put it to show because that's what it said. So I'm going to choose catalogue and show. Next is title, also from the picture table, and show. Then price. So it says price, also from the picture table, and show. So it said show, catalogue number, title, and price. Notice that they are capitalized. They are the fields you need to include. So it wants to know the catalogue number, title, and price of all unsold pictures by the artist Twister. So we've got our three fields. Next, we need to do this. What about these unsold pictures? So if we need to know if a picture's sold or not, we're going to use the sold field. So next is the sold field, also from the picture table. But we were not asked to show this, so we're not going to select this bit here. All we're going to do is fill the criteria. Now the criteria was unsold, so if it didn't sell, then it's false. Okay? And then our last one was pictures by the artist Twister. So we need the artist for our next field, also from the picture table. We're not going to show it because it didn't ask us to, but it does ask for the criteria Twister. And look how they put nice apostrophes around here so that we know that that's a text field. And so if we're searching for a criteria on a text field, then we're going to use equals speech marks around the text data. Speech mark or apostrophes, completely fine, as you will also know from programming. Now notice that I've put these on the same line because it's unsold pictures by the artist Twister. So both conditions are true. So it has to be by Twister and not sold. If I put Twister down here, then it would produce any of the ones that are not sold or ones that are by Twister. So I could get Twister items that were sold. Quality marks just achieved on this question. So now this one was building a query by example. Now we're going to analyze a query by example and answer some questions about it. So sometimes you've got to build it, sometimes you've got to explain what it would look like if it was then run as a report. Okay, so here is a table. And the table is called beverages, and it is looking at the number of calories that are found within 100 millimeters of popular beverages. So the popular beverages being like cola, lime, and energy drink, and how many calories are there in 100 milliliters. And it is showing these in either cans, bottles, or large bottles. So small bottle, large bottle, can. Okay? List the output that would be given by this query by example. So we're going to take a look through this here. So these are the fields that are showing. These are the fields that are our criteria. First thing I would do, forget the ones that are showing, just look at the criteria and decide which one of these are going to be output. So basically we're looking at the can, bottle and large, and all three of these fields need to be true. They're all on the same line. It's an AND criteria, so it needs to be, and think of it like a logic gate, almost like A and B and C need to be true. They all need to be true. All you need to do is just go down here and look for the times when all three of these are set to yes, and if they are, just mark it, put a little mark at the side or write it down in pencil so you can remember. So the first one that we can see is cola. So cola is all set to yes. This one's got a no, that's got a no. Here we go, there's an all yes. That one's lemonade, and that is our last one. So only two of them were all the criteria set to yes. Now that we know which ones are our answers, that's when we take a look at which fields need to show and any sorting information. So here we want to have the beverage number and the beverage name. That's the only two things showing. So we're going to have cola, which is BV01, and lemonade, which is BEV07, and they're going to be ordered descending. So remember, descending is ordering from Z to A, and it's Z to A based on the beverage's name, which is cola and lemonade. So L comes after C, and L will be our first one. So to display that, you just write the fields in order. So bev number for lemonade was BEV07. Then put a comma for the next field, and then the bev name, which was lemonade. Then our next one, next record goes down onto the next line. So again, the beverage number, which for cola was BEV01, comma to separate the field, and then the name here, cola. Okay, so that's all for our information on databases. Hopefully you have understood this well. You have everything you need to be successful. Go get those extra 10 marks. Nice and easy. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll try our best to answer. Best of luck with your examinations. And of course, if you want to know about more videos, feel free to subscribe and hit the notifications. Best of luck.